Director of the University Career Center, Laura Craig, also known as my boss. This event is being recorded and will be available sometime next week. Be sure you logged into this event through your Handshake account. To get started today, obviously the topic is preparing for entrance exams for graduate school. It's very possible one of the items in an application package will be test scores from a GRE, an LSAT, an MCAT, or some others. It's also possible that this won't be a requirement, or one test may have been changed for another one. Therefore, it's going to be important for you as you consider applying to a graduate program that you identify if it is a requirement, and if it is, prepare yourself for that test. Today, we have a panel of experts in graduate school testing and how to prepare for those tests. They're going to provide you some tips, tricks, and resources that are available to you to access as Temple students. And without further ado, I'm going to allow our two guests to introduce themselves. Why don't we start off with you, Rhonda?
Okay, well, thank you, Bob. Hello, everyone. My name is Rhonda Geyer. I'm with Temple University's Office of Non-Credit and Continuing Education. And one of the many programs that our office oversees is our test prep programs. And in conjunction, I'm going to turn it over to Dee to introduce herself.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Dee Gill, and I am the Associate Director of Digital Design for Educational Testing Consultants. We work in partnership with Temple University to offer graduate level test prep courses for the GRE, GMAT, and LSAT exams. And I'll be talking to you in a little bit about some strategies that you can use for those exams and why it's important to take a formal prep course to do well on those exams. So again, thank you everyone for being here.
Great. I'll unshare so Dee, you can get yourself situated. I want to be clear, this is not a test prep class. This is going to give you a little taste of what to expect and some ideas of what you might encounter and how to prepare, most importantly, the resources that are available. Now, after the presentation, we'll have time to answer any questions that you might have along the way. You can use the Q&A part of Zoom if you'd like, or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you if you want to ask your question that way. We'll provide links in the chat to some different resources throughout the program as well. And you can where you can connect to those resources. So Dee, Rhonda, take it away.
Okay, so I guess we can skip over our first couple of slides. Obviously, you were all here to learn about our test prep programs that are offered through the Office of Non-Credit and Continuing Education. And Dee and I will be leading you through the webinar today. But we have a brief agenda of what we're going to go over. We're going to talk about how relevant is it to relevant is standardized testing, why you might want to take a test prep course. Dee's going to go over some general tips and tricks as you're preparing for your exams, and she's going to talk about a specific strategy around math called picking numbers. Then we'll also talk about some of the test prep courses that Temple University does offer. Any closing remarks, and we'll save questions to the end. I know if you're going to put some questions in the chat, you know, we'll try to answer as we go along, but we'll certainly have time at the end to answer all of our questions that we have. So Dee, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Rhonda. And I'm going to start by just discussing how relevant is standardized testing. Many of you may be in different parts of your journey exploring graduate school. Maybe some of you are just thinking about whether you want to go to graduate school or not, and others may know the requirements for specific programs that you're interested in. So you may be getting ready to take a standardized test for your program if they require it. So let's talk about, why do we care about standardized testing for grad school? Well, oftentimes standardized testing is required for admission. Now, depending on the program you're applying to, some schools are going towards a test optional policy for standardized tests, while others still require tests as a part of the application packet, right, to consider you for acceptance into the program. So oftentimes the number one reason that students take these exams is because they're required for admission. They won't consider your application unless you provide them with an official test score. But there's some other reasons that we care about standardized testing, and one of those is scholarships. You can earn merit-based scholarships if you do well on certain standardized tests. I have heard about this from some people that I know who applied to law schools and were granted scholarships based on their performance on the LSAT. So those merit-based scholarships are out there. So doing well on a standardized test can help you to get some financial support in your graduate school journey. The other thing to consider, though, is if you're a returning student, maybe it's been a couple of years since you left college and you're thinking about going back to get a graduate degree, or you're thinking about changing your career. Oftentimes in those cases, they are going to want you to provide them with a standardized test score for you to be considered for their program. So there's different scenarios under which you would have to provide test scores, or where you should provide test scores. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many programs are test optional. That doesn't necessarily mean that, just because it's test optional, that you shouldn't take the test. For example, if you're applying to a PT program, a doctorate in physical therapy, and they say they're GRE optional. If you study for the GRE and you prepare and you get a good score, that score will still set you apart from other candidates who maybe didn't take the GRE, or who took it and maybe didn't score as well. So don't necessarily think that just because the school says they're test optional, that you shouldn't take the test. It can still set you apart from other candidates. So, if you have to take a standardized test, why would you want to take a test prep course? Why not just go online and study on your own, or, buy some books? Of course, there's so many different books out there for all of the graduate level tests. Why would you want to take a test prep course versus preparing on your own? The first important point, and what a formal course offers, is focused preparation. Now, depending on the test that you're taking, there may be item types on that test. There may be content that you're not familiar with. Speaking specifically about the GRE has a unique question type called data sufficiency. It doesn't show up on any other standardized test in that form, and it's unique to the GRE. The GMAT has a similar question type that's unique to the GMAT. So there are questions that you may see on these tests that you may not know how to approach. Even if you have the prerequisite math knowledge, they may still be tricky. So taking a course provides you with strategies and focused preparation, so you know how to attack the specific types of problems that you may see on whichever graduate level test you're preparing for. And as I go through a couple of the other points, if you would like to share in the chat, are you planning to take the GRE, GMAT, LSAT? If you know any of that information right now and you'd care to share, please go ahead and put that into the chat, just so I can get an idea of what our audience is preparing for. So second to focused preparation, access to experts. Now, if you've never taken one of these graduate standardized exams, then the test is new to you, right? You may not know much about the structure of the test, the format, the content. How is it scored? Is it an adaptive test? How many times can you take it? There's so many different policies and just information around all of these tests, right? And if you're new to the test, you may not know And you may go on the websites, you may go on the ETS website for the GRE or the Law School Admission Council for the LSAT. And there's a host of information there that can help you. But what's good about taking a structured course is there are people who can tell you, what you need to know about taking the test and answer your questions. And you don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time digging for those answers online. Having said that, if you're taking any of the standardized tests, you do want to be familiar with all the policies that are published on the websites of the test makers. So you do want to go on those websites and make sure you understand the policies surrounding the test, particularly with registrations and submitting scores. But a test prep course, it gives you access to experts who've taken the test, who've taught hundreds of people or even thousands of people how to do well on the test. So that that wealth of knowledge that they bring with them is valuable. Structure. Now, I see that Reagan is preparing for the MCAT. Trisha says GRE. These tests are very different. The MCAT is very much a test of your knowledge of science, of your biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics classes. The GRE is a very different test from the MCAT. The GRE tests your quantitative and verbal reasoning skills and your math knowledge up until about 8th or 9th grade. But you don't have to come into the GRE with the kind of knowledge that you come into the MCAT with. So GRE is much more strategy based, whereas the MCAT is a lot about, do you remember a lot of your knowledge from your undergraduate science courses? So if you were taking the GRE, for example, you would want to understand the different sections of the test and what strategies you can apply to the different sections. As I mentioned earlier, the GRE is a test that has a unique question type that's not found on any other test and that you probably have never seen if you've not taken the GRE. So knowing that and knowing how to approach such a problem is something that a test prep course can help you do versus, grabbing a GRE prep book and trying to teach yourself, right? Rather than trying to figure out the strategies, spending time to kind of come up with your own way of solving questions. A test prep course taught by an experienced instructor can cut down on all that time that you have to figure that stuff out. You can spend that time actually applying the strategies and practicing the strategies and gaining confidence in using the strategies. So confidence is, of course, the next thing. If you've never taken any of these tests before, you may not feel that confident. You may have taken a practice test just to see how, you might do. Or you may have heard about these tests from different people. The LSAT in particular is a test, and the MCAT too, are two tests that have, a real reputation for just being very tricky, very challenging. And it is true, they are challenging tests, but there are methods by which you can learn how to answer the questions, identify patterns in the questions, and do well on these tests. So if you have a guide showing you the strategies, walking you through your preparation, kind of, helping you through your journey of preparing for the test, having that person, your instructor, helping you, it can instill a lot of confidence in you so that when you do go and take the test, you feel like you have the tools in your arsenal that you need to do well. Okay, and you're not going it alone. So I think that's what helps is just having someone there to guide you who's seen all the questions and taught many students, because they're just coming with a lot of knowledge that can sort of help you and ease your concerns and address your worries about the tests. Minimize attempts. So of course, these graduate level exams are not free. The GRE, GMAT, and LSAT are all over $200 per attempt. And I believe the GMAT just raised the price a little bit a few weeks ago. So, these tests cost money, preparing costs money. You don't want to keep taking the test over and over because that's money and time that you're spending. So if you have a course, you have a structure, you know what you need to study, and you have a plan to follow over a period of weeks and months, that sets you up for success on your test so that you're not having to worry about taking the test over and over again. Okay. One thing that I didn't mention here that I did have in my notes is while the GRE and GMAT, they're testing your quantitative and verbal reasoning skills and your math knowledge up until early high school, the LSAT is a little bit different. It's not testing your knowledge in any particular subject area. And the LSAT is not testing your knowledge of any legal topics whatsoever. But the LSAT is a test of reasoning. And if you're a student who in your undergraduate career, you majored in philosophy or you took logic classes, you might have some idea on how to approach LSAT questions. But if you were like most of us and you didn't take those types of classes, the LSAT can look like a completely foreign language. So I would say specific to the LSAT, taking a prep course, especially if you don't have a background in philosophy and logic, is very useful because there are strategies that are critical to use on that particular test to be able to answer questions in the limited amount of time that you have to answer them. All right, I'll share a few general test prep tips. And if a few more people have come in, I'm not sure if we have some people that came in, but if you haven't shared what test you're planning on taking, please do share that in the chat just so I can get an idea of what we are all preparing for. So my first tip here is to take a practice test for a baseline score. Whether you're preparing for the GRE or the MCAT or the LSAT, you can find a free official practice test online. And you may have to create an account online to access those practice tests. For example, I see a few people are taking the GRE. You can go on the GRE website, which is ets.org. You can go on that website and create an account and take a free practice test. And specifically, that practice test tool is called GRE Power Prep. If you're taking the LSAT, it's the same thing for all of the tests. You can find at least one official practice test online. You want to take that test so you can get a baseline score. And the purpose of that is to see, where are you at the beginning of your test prep journey? You haven't done any intensive studying. You just want to see where you are today. And then you can think about, well, these are the programs I'm interested in applying to. These are their average scores for accepted applicants. So this is the gap that I need to bridge. I need to get a 10-point increase in my LSAT. I need to get a 20-point increase in my GRE verbal, etc. Right? So we take a practice test at the beginning of our preparation just to see where we are, so we can figure out what kind of work we need to do to get to our goal score. Okay, remember, the goal score is the score that gets you into the program that you want to get into. Okay, the goal score doesn't have to be a perfect score on any test. It's the score that gets you into the program that you're interested in going to. Okay. All right. Set a realistic target score. When it comes to the LSAT, everyone wants a perfect 180 on the LSAT. Same with the MCAT. People want a perfect score. It's great to have, that target of getting the highest score, but remember that the score you need is the one that gets you into the program. Even though this workshop today is about test prep and how important that is, I always like to remind students, your performance on the test is one aspect of your complete application profile. There are other parts of your profile that are important that admissions committees are looking at, such as your personal statement, your undergraduate activities and academic performance, your extracurriculars, your volunteer experience, specifically if you're going to like MD, PT, OT programs, employment history, all of those different things, right? So the score on the standardized test is one part of your entire application. They're looking at that as a whole, okay? So make sure that, you work on all parts of your application and don't necessarily think you have to get 100% on the LSAT because most people get into law school without getting a perfect 180. So set a realistic target score, something that's achievable and in line with the programs that you're interested in applying to. Identify your strengths and weaknesses. I've worked with a lot of test prep students, and sometimes what I find is students, they are studying for a particular test, and they're doing practice, and they keep practicing the things that they know how to do. And I understand why they do that, because that builds confidence, right? They keep getting those questions right, so they feel good. It helps them feel confident about how they're going to run the test. But what you really need to do is think about what parts of a test you are struggling the most in. Is there a certain question type that you're weakest in, right? This is an analysis you can perform after you take a practice test and get a baseline score. You want to focus your attention on developing your skills with those weaker areas, right? You don't want to spend all your time just practicing things you already know how to do. You really need to identify what your strengths and weaknesses are and make a plan to work on your weaknesses and practice items, question types, topics, etc., that relate to those weaknesses. Plan a study schedule that fits your life. I'm sure everyone here has a different schedule. You have different work obligations, personal obligations, school obligations, etc. So what works for one student isn't going to work for another student. You want to do something that works for you and that is sustainable. It might be true that for 1 or 2 weeks, you can study 6 hours a day at Starbucks on Saturday and Sunday. But could you do that for weeks or months on end up until testing? Probably not. It probably wouldn't be an effective use of your time. So pick a schedule that you can stick to from now or whenever you begin your preparation all the way until it's time for you to sit for your test, okay? The other thing to remember is, depending on the test you're taking, you need to think about when you're going to take the test and how does that date line up with when scores have to be submitted to the program you're applying to. So some of you are taking the GRE. Now the GRE is offered usually 5 or 6 days out of the week at home, right? You can take the test at home or at a testing center. So the GRE, you can really sign up for pretty regularly. The slots are available all over the United States, testing centers or with the at-home test. The GMAT is similar. You can take it online, you can take it at home, pretty much whenever you want. The LSAT is a little bit different. The LSAT has fixed administrations. So if you're thinking of taking the LSAT, you have to sign up for a fixed test date. And like, for example, the next test dates are, I wrote them down, January, February, April, and June, right? So there's 4 test dates that have been announced going through next summer. So you want to make sure if you're taking the LSAT or the MCAT, a test that has a fixed test administration date, that you plan around that date. And with the LSAT, you usually have to register a few weeks in advance. So you want to be aware of those registration deadlines. Make sure you get your paperwork together and you're able to get the test date that you need. Because once you have that test date on your calendar, mentally you kind of know this is the day that, this is the day that I'm taking the test, and this is how much time I have up until that day to plan my studying. Okay. All right. Focus your study time on a particular skill. Don't just take practice tests. So when you're preparing for any type of test, the research has shown that, if you just study all the content in general, right, you're probably not going to develop your skills or improve your understanding as much as you would if you identify a particular question type or content area or equation or topic that you struggle with, right? So let's say you're taking the GMAT exam and you really struggle with geometry. Having a study session where you just review your geometry formulas and you do geometry questions is much better than, saving 3 hours to sit down and take an entire GMAT practice exam. So make sure that once you guys get into your prep process, that you're tailoring your study sessions to a particular skill that you need to develop. There will be a point, particularly if you're taking the LSAT and you're closer to your test date, where you may want to just take practice tests, but that should come later on after you've developed all of the different skills that you need to do well on the test. All right, stop studying the night before the test. This is important, and people don't like to follow this one because they think, you know, every last minute counts. But, you know, at some point you have to just put the books down, and you have to, you know, kind of just let everything go and give your mind some rest before you take the test. It's very mentally fatiguing and stressful to be preparing for graduate school, to be preparing for these tests. So it's actually going to benefit you if at some point before your test date, you put your books down, you tell yourself you've done as much as you could, you've prepared, you've been working on this for weeks and months, you're ready for the test, and you just, you know, stop preparing and you go and take the test. And of course, no matter what happens on test day, you should plan something fun or relaxing for after the test. You should reward yourself for all of the hard work that you did leading up to test day. Okay. All right, I'm going to show you a strategy that is a math strategy that can be applied to the GRE and the GMAT exams, specifically since those test your quantitative reasoning skills. And the strategy that I'm going to share here is called picking numbers. Now, before I actually show you the strategy, what I want you to remember about the strategy is it seems quite simple, and in many ways it is, but it can be useful on some of the easiest questions on the GRE and GMAT, but also some of the most challenging questions on the tests. So this is a good strategy to keep in your back pocket on some math questions where you're really not sure how to get started in answering the question. All right, so what is the picking number strategy? The picking number strategy is basically taking a question, a math question that involves variables, and making it more concrete by replacing the variables with actual numbers. So in this case, let's read our question stem here. There are B boxes sitting in a warehouse. If F% of those boxes have been filled and the rest are empty, which of the following expressions represents the number of empty boxes? So some of you may look at that and know how to approach this, you know, in the abstract form using the variables, but other people might, you know, feel more comfortable making the question concrete. And I find that most students, if they apply the strategy and make it concrete, it takes them less time to get to the correct answer than trying to reason through the abstract side of this question with just the variables. So they want me to find an expression that represents the number of empty boxes. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to pick numbers. And a good tip that's on the screen here that's applicable to any picking numbers question is use numbers that make the math easy. You don't have to use huge numbers, use small numbers that are manageable, okay? On the GRE, you will get an on-screen calculator, okay? It's a 4-function calculator that you can use on screen. If you're taking the GMAT, you don't get an on-screen calculator except for in one section called integrated reasoning, okay? So most of the GMAT math you have to do without a calculator. So that's another reason why we want to make sure we use easy numbers. If we have to do any mental math, we can do it. So when you have questions that involve percents, then it helps to use the number 100. And that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so my first step is to pick numbers. Well, in my problem, they gave me 2 variables, a B and an F. B is the number of boxes, and F is the percent of boxes that have been filled. So I'm just going to say there's 100 boxes, okay? And I'm going to say that of those 100 boxes, 20% have been filled, okay? I have 100 boxes and 20% have been filled. That means the rest are empty. So let's work out the answer using the numbers we just picked. If I have 100 boxes and 20 of those boxes have been filled, how many boxes are there that are empty? If you know, you can tell me in chat. If 20 are filled, how many boxes are empty? Let's see if anyone wants to answer in chat. Okay, I think you guys are feeling a little bit shy. No worries at all. If we have 100 boxes and 20% of them are filled, well, 20% of 100 is 20 boxes. So 100 boxes, 20 of those boxes are filled. That means I have 80 boxes that are not filled. Okay, let me know in chat if that doesn't make sense. And I'll just put in the chat what I did. I just did 100 minus 20% of 100. All right. So 80 boxes are not filled. Now my next step is to look at my answer choices, and I'm actually going to plug in the same numbers that I picked for B and F into each answer choice. So let me get my pen out. So I have 100 here for B. I'm going to plug that in. And I have 20 that I picked for F. I'm going to plug that into F. And I'm going to do that for A, B, C, and D, okay, for each of them. So I'll show you what that looks like if I were to plug in my values into the variables in each answer choice. Now, my final step is to see which of those equations that I just put up are going to give me the same answer that I solved, which was that 80 are not filled, okay? So at this point, I'm not going to work through each of these answers. We don't need to, spend time working through them. We should be able to look visually and see what's going to get us close to 80. So looking at answer choice A, and let me switch to my pointer. A is going to be 2 times 20 times 100. That's going to be a huge number. It's definitely not going to be 80. So answer choice A is out. All right, let's look at answer choice B. So I'm going to cross out A. Answer choice B, it's going to be 100 times 20, 100 minus 20 times 100 over 100. Okay, I'm not 100% sure what that's going to be, but I do notice I have the same thing in my numerator and denominator, which means they cancel. The hundreds cancel, leaving me with 100 minus 20. Well, 100 minus 20, that's 80. So that sounds like it could be the right answer. But let's make sure no other answer gives us the same value. So I'm going to look down at answer choice C. 100 times 1 minus 20 times 100. Well, 1 minus 20 is negative 19. I'm just going to stop there because this is going to give me a negative answer. And I don't want a negative answer. I want positive 80. So that means that C cannot be it. And then finally, answer choice D. Answer choice D, 100 minus 100 in my numerator. Well, 100 minus 100 is 0. I can go ahead and stop there. 0 times anything is 0. So answer choice D is going to give me 0. That is also the wrong answer. So only B gave me 80, right? So we pick the answer that gives us the same answer that we worked out, 80 and 80. So answer choice B is correct. Okay, this is the picking number strategy. It's very useful for easy and harder math questions on the GRE and GMAT. And again, how do you know when you should use this strategy? If you have a problem that has variables, and your answer choices have variables, right? That's what we see here. All of our answer choices have variables. Then that problem is a good candidate for picking numbers. Okay. All right. I think the next slide is Rhonda's, so I'm just going to pass it over to her.
Okay, Dee, thank you so much. Sharing all the general tips and tricks, and then going through the numbers picking strategy, I think was really helpful. So thank you for that. So Temple University, in conjunction with educational testing consultants, does offer a variety of test prep courses and workshops. We focus on the GMAT, the GRE, and the LSAT. We have a variety. We have a strategy workshop, which is a 1-hour workshop that is free to attend. Anyone can attend the strategy workshops, and they are live online. So just like we are live online right now, It's not a self-paced, you're live online with the instructor. The strategy workshops, again, will really go through some of these tips and tricks that Dee has talked a little bit about. It will introduce you to the structure of the particular exam and show you, again, some of the best practices as you're preparing for those exams. So the strategy workshops are basically 1-hour sessions and they're free to attend. Then we have our, what we call our full test prep courses. So for the GMAT, GRE, and LSAT, we have courses that vary between 24 hours and 30 hours of instruction, depending on which exam you're prepping for. Again, they are live online. You're online with the other classmates and the instructor at the same time. There is a cost for those exam or test prep courses, and they range anywhere from $8.99 to $9.99. We do offer a 10% discount for all Temple students, alumni, and staff. But again, as Dee was saying, the test prep courses, you really get to dig into the content of the exams, really focus on those strengths and weaknesses, and gives you the opportunity with that one-on-one instruction with the instructor to really target where your weaknesses are and what you really want to focus on as you're preparing to take your tests. So between the strategy workshops and the full-length test prep courses, we have classes for GRE, GMAT, and LSAT, and discounts are available for all of those. So where do we go next, Dee?
I think next one is mine, Rhonda, and then I pass it back to you. I think I have one more. Here we are. All right, some final points here about taking a test prep course and standardized testing in general. As you guys continue your journey towards graduate school, make sure that the programs that you're interested in applying to, that you reach out to them to find out what tests do they require or recommend, and what types of scores are they looking for on those tests. Sometimes this information will be published on their websites, but if it's not, you should give them a call or email the admissions department and see what information they can share with you. This information is especially helpful after you've taken that baseline test, right? And you've figured out what your score is. Once you know what the program that you're interested in is looking for, you can start making your study plan. But the other things, of course, you want to make sure that you're aware of are deadlines for getting your applications into the programs and also submitting scores. Schools are very different on how they handle the applications. Some of them want you to submit your scores and all your application materials by the deadline. Other schools will let you submit your application and then accept your scores past that deadline. But you don't want to assume, that a school is one way or the other. Check with them and make sure you follow whatever their timeline is for getting all your materials in. Okay. As I mentioned before, take a practice test. Don't be afraid to take a practice test, even if you've never had any exposure to GRE, GMAT, LSAT, MCAT, whatever it might be. It just gives you an idea of what kind of questions are going to be on the test, and it lets you know where you are at the beginning of your test prep process, okay? Create a study plan based on how you did on that practice test so that you can optimize your score on test day. Again, remember that involves knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, doing targeted study sessions, focusing on certain skills, and making a study plan that's sustainable, right, over a period of weeks or months up until test day. Like I mentioned before, doing a half hour, every other day of prep for a period of weeks or months is better than doing a couple of 8-hour cram sessions in the weeks leading up to the test. Okay, so short, consistent, frequent prep independent study sessions, those are better than long cram sessions close to the test date. Okay. All right, I'll pass it back to Rhonda.
Okay, thank you, Dee. And so this final slide really just provides our web information and our email address. So if you go onto our test prep website right now, you will see the courses and their descriptions. Our registrations for our spring classes will go live on Monday, November 21st. So just a week and a half away. Our registrations go live for spring. But right now you can go onto the websites and at least see what's involved in all of the courses. Again, for each, the GMAT, the GRE, and the LSAT. You can go right to our regular non-credit website. The one that says test prep takes you right to our test prep website. And then our email address. And so our email address, we're checking that, every day. We're checking the non-credit email account, responding to emails. And so if there are questions as you are looking at classes or you're having a problem registering, please reach out to us. We'd be glad to help you through that process. And I think that concludes our PowerPoint information. So now I guess we can open it up for additional questions and answers.